Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Emma Cownley. I am a copywriter and a blogger, and I make you videos on copywriting and blogging. But today I'm going to be putting the right old shits up you because I'm about to reveal that you are probably using the comma incorrectly. The reason I know this is because commas have pretty fast and loose rules with regard to how you use them, and if you use them incorrectly it can have relatively disastrous results, which I will show you later on in the video. Some of them are they're pretty bad, so it really pays to make sure that you're using the comma properly. So I'm going to tell you how to use it and mistakes that you are probably making. I don't want to overgeneralize here, but I edit and proofread a heck of a lot of work in my line of work, obviously, and I see these mistakes all the time. So don't be that guy. Learn how to use a comma. So, comma, pretty simple, right? Little tiny tadpole, sits at the bottom of your writing. You use it and don't use it as and when you feel. It's pretty simple, right? No, it's not simple. The comma comes from ancient Greek times, and I think that the meaning, according to Lynn Truss of Eats, Shoots and Leaves, says that it means break a piece off, and it was brought into play to help public speakers and actors learn how to break up a sentence as they were reading aloud, because back in those days not everybody could read, so spoken word and performance pieces were how people told stories and communicated information to one another. So punctuation originated from ancient Greek times, and the comma particularly doesn't look like it does today back then, but it was used to break up a sentence and tell the actor when to pause and how to phrase and form the sentence in a rhythm so that the delivery was consistent every single time. And we still use it for that today. So Lynn Truss says that the comma is used for two different things: to illuminate the grammar of a sentence and to point up in rhythm, tone, just the way that the sentence should sound as you're saying it. And as you can probably tell, these two things are relatively subjective, which has led to a heck of a lot of arguments throughout the history of literature. Authors, editors, journalists, writers bickering with one another about the correct use of a comma. It's controversial. It really does make people angry. So if you're just a humble guy wanting to learn how to use a comma in your work emails, this thing it's a can of worms. Don't talk to a writer about commas. For the love of God, not if you want to have your ear talked off and your face blasted off with abuse. Commas. Using too many commas can be very disruptive to your writing and your sentence. When somebody is reading and they see a comma, they register it, they know they have to break. So, one big long sentence full of commas, very complicated on the eye, very complicated on the brain, and it leads to people reading along, pausing, breaking, having to reread the sentence, not quite getting it. It's too complicated. Too many commas is a big no-no. Not any commas, or putting commas in the wrong place, is just as bad. I'm going to flash up a couple of examples on the screen now. Hopefully I can find that one about let's eat grandma. That's one of my personal favourites. But yeah, when commas go wrong, they go badly wrong. Like eating grandma wrong. As we go through the correct use of the comma, I'm going to stop and point out some of the incorrect uses that I typically see, just so that you can see the correct way to do them and the incorrect way to do them. Let's start out with listing things. Commas are used in lists. Typically they are used in place of and or. Red and green and blue and yellow. Red, green, blue, yellow. You get the picture. Commas in lists. This leads me on to a highly controversial topic known as the serial comma, more commonly known on the street as the Oxford comma, so called because the Oxford Dictionary people are hella fond of this kind of comma, and Americans always use an Oxford comma, always. If you're writing in American English, Oxford comma is the standard. In England, people get really cross about it. I don't know why. Here's what the Oxford comma actually is. So if you've got a list, red, blue, green and yellow, you would pop a comma after each one and then typically a comma before the and. If you weren't using an Oxford comma, you would say blue and green. Herein lies the issue. Some cases it can become incredibly confused. For example, that final item could be both blue and green because you said blue and green. If they're two separate, really what you should do is pop the comma in there so that the reader can identify that it is blue and the final article is green, if you get where I'm coming from. In some instances, it's far clearer and easier to use an Oxford comma so that people can see that they are separate items in the list. Other times, you may not need to use it. In fact, you may want to limit punctuation altogether and take that out. It's your call, it's down to you whether or not you use it. I think it's just not sensible to say it's right to use it or it's wrong to use it. I think it's use case based. So, Oxford comma, is it a mistake or isn't it? Who knows? Who knows? Second use of a comma is for joining clauses together. So, for example, I met Mark and we went down the park. I met Mark, comma, and we went down the park. You're joining those two clauses with a comma. Here leads me into my next big error that I see. It's called the comma splice, and it happens when you join two separate clauses with a comma. Relating back to my most recent example, it would be I met Mark, comma, we went down the park. Those are two separate clauses. If you cut it in half, they could be two sentences. I met Mark, we went down the park. So putting a comma between the two is a comma splice because you've spliced two separate clauses together into one. To correct that error, you need to put a conjunction in there or just a full stop. I met Mark, comma, and we went down the park. That's your conjunction. Or I met Mark, full stop, we went down the park. That's how you fix the comma splice. It's a very common error, especially when you're going for brevity in a sentence and you want to keep it all tidy and short so you kind of get rid of the conjunctions. No. If you want to keep it short and loose, add a full stop right in the middle and you're golden. Alternatively, pop your comma back in and add a conjunction. Bosh. Next use of a comma is before direct speech. This isn't something that's going to typically apply to everybody. When you're writing a work email, you're not going to put direct speech into an email. It's something that typically crops up in journalism, for example, or if you're writing a press release or anything that needs a quotation in it, you would say, when speaking to me last Thursday, you know, Sarah said, comma, blah, 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 blah. It just helps to separate the sentence out and gives a nice pause before the direct speech begins. People have learned to take that as a cue. It's falling out of fashion slightly, but it's the old rule. It's how you do it. It's how I would do it. So before direct speech, pop your comma in there, open quotation, off you go. Next use of a comma, to mark a non-restrictive clause. What? I know, it sounds complicated. It isn't complicated. If you fancy yourself as a bit of a sophisticated writer, you probably do this technique, so let's make sure you're doing it properly. A non-restrictive clause is basically that little bit you get in the middle of a sentence that you could basically just lift right out and the sentence would read normally. It's like an aside in the middle of a sentence. You can separate it out with em dashes either side or even just put it in brackets. An example of this would be, I went to the shops, my sister in tow, to buy a couple of beers. My sister in tow is the non-restrictive clause that you can take out. I went to the shops to buy beer. But to give this sentence a little something extra, additional information if you will, I pop that in with the commas to show there should be a pause, then the additional part, then a pause, then we continue on with our clause as if it never happened, but we've got a little bit more information. My sister came along as well to get the beers from the shop. Non-restrictive clause, cover that off with a pair of commas. After an introductory clause, you need to put a comma. Because he was a pain in the arse, comma, I like to avoid John. I'm starting kind of at the back end of the sentence there, but it's an introductory clause, because he's a pain in the arse. If I didn't have a comma in there, that would be one giant run-on sentence that doesn't really make sense. You want to have that pause after your introductory clause. Final use of the comma. To separate adjectives, but wait. There are two types of adjectives in this case. Classifying and qualitative. What the hell am I about to tell you? Here we go. You put your commas in between qualitative, not classifying. So for example, I threw up wet, chunky, sick on Sarah's shoes. The sick is wet and chunky. Those two adjectives describe the quality of the sick. So you need a comma between them because they are the same type of thing. Chunky, and you get the picture. Let's not. Classifying are two adjectives which tell you the class of the item. An example of classifying would be it was an Indonesian metalcore riff. I don't know what one of those is, but bear with me, it's just an example. An Indonesian metalcore riff. The riff is from Indonesia. The genre is metalcore. It is a riff. You don't need to put a comma between Indonesian and metalcore because they are both classifying adjectives. It's just as easy as that. So as we come to the end of this video, I hope that you're beginning to see that commas are actually a really tricky beast, because other than the uses I've outlined, and I think there are actually a couple more uses that I haven't even gone into, because as you can see this video is getting long and your brain is beginning to get fried because I'm using lots of technical terms like non-restrictive and classifying and qualitative, etc. You're going out of your mind right now and panicking because you think, are you using the comma in the correct way? Next time, just stop and think as you're writing. Don't overuse commas and don't put them in the wrong places. Those are the two golden rules of using commas. If you take away anything from this video, let it be those two things. Because as I said, the rules of comma usage are a little bit loose and widely debated. So stick to those rules and you should be fine. If not, hit me up in the comments section below and let's chat about it. Let's chat about your commas and how you are using them. That brings me to the end of the video for this week. I hope I've not fried your brain too much. As I said, any questions, comments, feedback, nice things you want to say about me, you can put them in the comment box below or call me out on Twitter at @EJCownley and I'll happily engage in a dialogue with you. Until next week, take care of yourself. Over and out.